Hey everybody, Matt Lawton here, and this is the Astrological Winds channel. Going to take a look at the astrological weather report for the week of May 19th through 25th. And there's actually a lot going on this week. It's a pretty busy week. It's led by three of the planets changing signs, of which the most major is Saturday when Saturn goes into Aries. And this is one of the biggest changes of the year. And I talked at length about it on the annual blog at the beginning of January and the monthly blog at the beginning of May here. So I'm not going to speak a lot about it this time. You should go back and check the annual blog out and the monthly one if you haven't yet, to get the information on that, because it is one of the biggest changes of this year, Saturn going into the sign of its fall. And I will say this about that already, is that you can see in the world already how the posturing is going on with leaders that have their own initiative, their own subjective way of looking at things, and being really pushy about that. So I don't see that there's going to be any chance for what we're calling world peace and any of these conflicts that are going on right now for the next 2 or 3 years. I just don't see that as a possibility. This is like our leaders on steroids, just being very aggressive. And remember, in your personal relationships too, this is definitely going to make things difficult. It's going to make everyone kind of feel like more independent and also more isolated and alone at the same time. So we're going to have to learn a lot in these next 2 or 3 years about relying on ourselves to get what the physical support that we need, and it will give a cautious, conservative approach as the best way to handle these 2 or 3 years. So think about that economically and stuff too. But also, we're going to have both the sun and Mercury go into Gemini this week. And then there's a bunch of aspects, mainly the sun and Mercury, although there's a couple other things too. So just a little business first. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog. It's on YouTube every week. I would love for you to become a follower if you have an account and you like what you're seeing. And you can't forget to turn the notifications on, or you're not going to know and you're not going to remember when the blog's posted every week. So that's a really good idea to do. And remember, it's available on podcasts too. The YouTube channel has been going about 6 years, I think now, and it was a podcast before that. So it's still available on podcasts. Just check out Astrological Winds channel. Obviously, you don't get the video of seeing me, but the information is all there and the same. And that frees you up to, I know sometimes it's hard to check out a blog, right? So when you can listen to it on a podcast, it frees you up to multitask. Like you can do your jog or whatever at the same time, So that way you get a chance to get it into. And remember, also I have an Instagram page set up for Astrological Winds channel. I do put the link on that every week to the blog too, and sometimes some extra information or fun stuff in there too. So if you'd like to become a follower, and remember, it is always available on my website, www.astrologicalwinds.com. Just like I was talking about a second ago, the annual one is still there. The monthlies for the last few months are there, and the weeklies for the last few weeks. So go back if you need to and check them out. Just check out that blogs tab and you'll see the blog every week and the past ones there. And then also it has a calendar page. Check that out. Some interesting, gives you some of the Earth calendar stuff that is happening every week. And also it has the menu for my professional services. I've been doing readings for over 20 years professionally, was trained for 7 years. I would love to do your chart, or someone else that that's looking for that service. So my pricing is there. I can work if you need to make payments, stuff like that. Check that stuff out. I really want to do it for you, or anyone who's interested in that. You're ready for that. All right. What I ask, since this is a free service, is that you pass the link along anytime you check the blog out. And if you've done it before, please do it again. Really appreciate that. I put a lot of time and effort in this for us, and if you can just pay it forward for me in that little way, that really helps me a lot. I really love to have the blog grow in an organic, word of mouth kind of way. Really, I feel it's like the most authentic way. So I already talked about like the Saturn and Aries, little synapse, a little summary of that, and I'm not going to go into it again. But I did want to mention something once again. Just go back last week really quick, right? It was something that I just noticed. Like, I don't completely pay attention to the news all the time, but that Sun conjunct Uranus was exact on Saturday, and that was the day the ship from Mexico hit the bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was the day those tornadoes went flying through 3 or 4 states and did significant damage, really crazy kind of outbreak. And it was also the whole week was like courts ruling against the current administration and a lot of the steps they tried to force, and then there was also even Congress turning on each other and not being able to pass the budget and the agenda of the current administration. So you can see all that Sun Uranus stuff, the rugged individualist saying, no, I'm going to rebel against this, even if it's in my own party, even if it's in, and then like the natural disasters that are really fired up, and interesting, with Uranus getting close to Gemini, it was tornadoes, like winds really coming through in the US anyway. But like, yeah, just some really interesting stuff to, showing how potent, once again, astrology can be for timing certain things. All right, let's get into this week because there is a bunch of things going on. A lot of aspects, especially with the Sun and Mercury and those, and they're also changing signs. So that starts on Tuesday. The Sun will sextile Saturn right before it goes into Gemini, actually, in the 30th critical degree of Saturn, which means it's a very potent energy, actually. And it's an excellent day to get work done, actually. This really gives us a very structured, detailed approach to anything that we're doing. And we want to see practical results. So for me and the world we live in, the reality of the world we live in, what is the best way to use that energy in your work, right? In your career? Focus this energy on your work or career to get the most out of it. You can really, gets a lot of work done, detailed work done, planning work done, organizing work done, paperwork, computer work. This is a time also where you can get help from authorities, your boss, or anybody who represents some wisdom or knowledge or has some kind of authority in the work that you're doing or whatever project that you're trying to take on. We are very willing to sacrifice pleasure for working and getting practical results. It's a good attitude to have. So it's a useful one to do. Don't waste this energy. And it's also very self-reflective, this energy. It's got a very serious way of looking at things, but it also brings great discernment. We're not going to have the wool pulled over our heads by anybody with this energy. And it's at that 30th degree. So it's really critical energy. It can really actually bump you up to the next level of whatever you focus this energy in on. And if you don't do it, you could end up having to like go back to the beginning of the class and start all over again. So that's basically a nice positive energy in a conservative, serious, practical way to start this week. And we'll feel it today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Really good week for working, okay? Then and like I said, the Sun will go into Gemini later on Tuesday, that same day, right? And this is a time, so in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the end of spring. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's the end of fall. We're getting closer and closer to the solstice points, right? So, this is a time where we really open up our minds. We get very receptive. We're very curious about taking in new information. We float around like a butterfly from thing to thing. Our attention span is not deep or great, like it doesn't go deep. This is like, oh, a little bit here, a little bit there, this ingredient here, this ingredient there, moving on here, moving on there. So, that we're really into like, collecting information, anything that really tickles our fancy, so to speak. And a lot of times that can be through more communications. Gemini opens up the line of communications too. And travel is another thing that like exposes us to more information. Like this is a time where we have, like I said, a very curious disposition. We're kind of like an eager student, and so like, like I said, the thing is, it is a little bit, it will jump from one thing to another. It's a kind of like a primary education energy rather than like going into something really deep and secondary, but it also gives a really Gemini gives a positive mindset too, like as far as attitude, like you go out there, you're kind of looking for a little bit of fun. It's a playful energy. Gemini is rules youth, so it's like got this youthful, eager energy to go out. And sometimes that can even go over into being a jokester, into being a prankster. And, just remember Gemini's a little bit disconnected to sensitivity to emotions, especially the emotions of others. So, like, don't take the prankstering too quickly. But, moods change rapidly. We're on the move very quickly. We're into learning, and especially through reading, like reading online, taking in words like podcasts, even like this podcast, things like that, and we really do like to take in information from teachers too, like people who we respect their knowledge is a good way to say it, is something that we're really interested in. So that, will be sun going into Gemini. That will be for the next month, right? From starting on Tuesday, which is the 20th. And then on Thursday, we've got the third and final hit. If you remember a couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks ago, we got the second hit of Venus trining Mars. So now we've got the third and final hit of Venus trining Mars. And like this is definitely creative energy flowing out really well. And we can make really good creative connections with other people. Okay. There's harmony between us on the creative level. So like we can be very supportive of one another's uniqueness and creativity on this. Now, if you can take this also if you're in a romantic relationship, there's usually a great flow of energy in those types of relationships. Now there's harmony between partners. No one feels like they're getting the short end of the stick in the relationship, and it's also really a good time just for relationships with friends. It's the same thing, like friends you just feel so much in harmony with. Life feels so good, like, when you're like that. And no, even though Venus is still weak in Aries, right? It's in detriment. Both the signs are, both the planets are in fire signs, right? So like they're really like willing, they respect each other's uniqueness. You see the individual things in other people that attract you to them, that things that you like, that's like their special gifts, so to speak, and then like I said, and this is also great creative energy. So like if nothing else, anything that you're doing is infused with your creativity in this very harmonious way. And then that same day, speaking of creativity, the sun is also sextile Neptune. Remember, Neptune just went into Aries, right, on March 30th. And now, and so the sun just changing signs is now going to sextile that Neptune, which is only at about 1 degree of Aries as the sun goes into 1 degree of Gemini. So you're going to get that right away. And this just opens us up even more. It makes us more receptive to taking in more. Now, what's interesting is it does bring in some of the right brain to the Gemini energy now. It like makes us more sensitive actually to subtle stuff like our environment and the energy around it and the people around us and the emotions that they're feeling. So this can really open up a level of willingness to help others, to be like compassionate, to like, want to like sacrifice ourselves, or the interest of the Gemini, that the intellect and stuff will start to filter towards spiritual or mystical or psychic stuff, or stuff that Neptune represents, artistic things, creative words, things like that. So, like, it'll take some of the, like, the sun Gemini, the Sun Saturn stuff will start to transform into a Sun Neptune. So it's not all left brain stuff. It starts to become this balance between the two. And it is a good time, when on Thursday, when that's happening, to take a little time to withdraw and contemplate and self-reflect. It's okay. Your physical energy will probably be more mellow this week anyway, with the sun hitting both Saturn and Neptune. Neither one of them is going to charge physical energy up, right? So it's a really good day to work on the creative side of your ideas on Thursday. And once again, you can go back and still use the Sun Saturn stuff and take those creative things and create the structure around them to bring them into your work or whatever project that is. Then Saturday is the big day when Saturn goes into Aries. I'm not going to repeat myself. I will give you some information here. It will stay in Aries. It will go retrograde on July 13th at 2 degrees of Aries. And then by September 2nd, will retrograde back into Pisces for the rest of the year. So we're going to get a little taste of the Aries energy here for what's that about? 1, 2, 3. This 1, 2, 3.5 months, right? And then it's going to go back into Pisces for about 5 more months before Saturn goes direct again, and will then go back into Aries next January. And then that we'll really see for about 2+ years then of just pure Saturn and Aries. And like I said, I don't think we're going to get peace in the world if that's what anybody's holding out for. If anything, we're going to get leaders that are going to make it more divisive, and we're going to end up having to learn really how to take care of our own physical needs more individually, possibly, than we've ever had to before in our lives. So be prepared for that. So otherwise, really nice on Saturday is a Sun Pluto trine. Okay, because remember, Pluto's right at the beginning of its sign too, Aquarius. It's about at 3 degrees Aquarius. So this is really powerful energy that we can use. Once again, a very valuable day, because we're in the flow and harmony of wanting to make change and transformation to the world around us, both abstractly and concretely. This is a day to go for it, to use. This brings up a lot of creative energy that has power, that we can really move things. We can really, not shake things, move things. It's harmonious energy, right? It's very deep. It's very transformational, okay? And it's gonna, make it, it gives us the ability to make changes in our life and to be assertive about that, to exert the energy, to tap into our own power and change things around us. So you can get a lot of work done on Saturday. Don't, this is, and even Friday and Sunday again, this is going to, you'll feel this energy, and you can really, once again, don't waste the energy is what I say. You can have some really profound connections with others too that are very deep and harmonious and can bring change, transformation to both persons' lives. Then on that same day, Saturday, there's also a Mercury conjunct Uranus that day. And so that's a pretty big conjunction. I didn't write it on the board, but maybe I really should, because that is the biggest aspect of this week, is Mercury is conjunct Uranus on Saturday too. And that is right near the end of the end of Taurus. So it's a critical time. And what's that? I told you guys a lot the last 6, 7 years. Uranus and Taurus has really shaken our world up as far as our resources and the way that we normally get resources. And this will give us the ability to connect the intellect, the lower mind, with the intuition, the higher mind, together at that last critical degree of Taurus, and perhaps give us some lightning bolt strikes of ingenious ideas on new ways to deal with things that have to do with that. Very ingenious energy. This is the mind, that can have a very penetrating quality to it, very perceptive, very insightful. But there's going to be a lot of energy stimulating and coming in at once. So we have to be really careful about not getting scattered, about not working ourselves up into a frenzy and then starting all of a sudden becoming sloppy and careless with our decisions, with our words, and things like that. We start to jump to conclusions too quickly. We're going to only, set ourselves back, but we're going to be really fired up. So we're going to need to like slow our thinking down somehow if we can discern and recognize what's really valuable with this energy. And that's the work we want to harness. That's the electrical stuff that we want to bring discipline into and really focus on. Otherwise we will get worked up into a frenzy, and we may miss some important things. But this is really, at that critical degree, it's a conjunction. It's about seeding new things, seeding new ways to take care of our resources at the end of Taurus, because we don't want to get left behind. We get left behind during hard times, we could end up right in the bread line, so to speak. So this is a time where we really need to like find some ingenuity, find some of those lightning strikes, and bring them in, and then we can work with all that Saturn energy this week going on to really bring some structure into that stuff. And then Sunday, Mercury happily skips off into Gemini, full speed ahead into this one of the two signs it loves to be in the most. A sign where it just loves to share information. Basically, for me, I've always looked at like the cycle of Mercury and Gemini as this: you're going out and you're collecting some information, and wow, you come across something really new and exciting, and it gets you really stimulated, and you're like, oh my goodness. And you take that energy in and you start to form some opinions and ideas about it yourself, and then you need to go talk it out. You got to go tell your friends, you got to go tell your family, you got to tell anyone you meet. You know why? Because you want to hear it come back to you, and that completes the whole link of knowledge right there. From the start of getting it and then bouncing it back off of other people, boom, the knowledge is complete. The loop has been learned. It's within you at that point. So when Mercury's in Gemini, the mind is processing nonstop new information. Once again, it loves to read. It loves to get information through reading online, through books, through communications, through other people, through classes, through teachers, through learning, and it's not ready to absorb this stuff very deeply. It's ready to, like I said, move around from one subject to another. It's like primary type of education, right? And so here we go, and then what is it it's also good at is taking this information and speaking about it, doing like kind of public speaking, that kind of thing. So people can get very chatty and talkative in this when Mercury's in Gemini. And the thing we have to be careful of is that we're not just talking mainly about superficial stuff that is not really worthy of all that energy that we're putting into it, because the mind can really jump from one thing to another. It really doesn't, it's not really absorbing very deeply yet. It's more into the exposure and that moment of it, like boom, of the enlightenment. And it's not really going to go that deep. It wants to be like, okay, I need to like make sure this, I need to communicate it. Okay, now it's come back to me, now I can bring it back in. It moves like that. But what's really cool is on that same day, right away, Mercury will sextile Saturn. So that is a day when the mind can tap into discipline, when the mind can take very complex stuff and break it down and get into the details of it, focus really deeply, discipline itself, and really take it into practical levels. Take some of those ideas, get some practical results at this, very concentrated, very focused mind, very critical eye too, like it can see the flaws and the things that can be made better and not take that in a personal way. It's very objective about doing that, very good for organizing and getting even the use of, technology and science to help us out with our ideas now that we're stimulated with Neptune. Now we can bring some physical stuff in there, create the forms we want around that. So, really good day for doing paperwork, serious planning, organizing, serious attitude that really wants to get practical results. All right, well, that's our journey for this week. Just like I really think it's a great week for work, you guys, and just like really bringing in new ideas, getting them in there, physically putting them, whatever projects you're working on, career or your whatever projects or personal projects. I really think it's a good time. We're going to get new information. We can get some creativity in there, and we have the discipline and the aspects to support us to get some of those changes going. So that's what I got for us this week. Next week, we've got a new moon at 6-7 degrees of Gemini, and that's actually on Monday. So that is going to be one of the main things I talk about. And then we get the sun and Mercury are going to conjunct each other. That's going to be their superior conjunction, actually, in Gemini. So that's what I'll be mainly talking about next week. And that'll be our last week in May. And then we will move on to June. This is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. This is a free service, and I really need you right now to pay me back, pay it forward by passing it on to somebody else, even if you've done that before, someone you know who's going to appreciate it. And remember, if you'd like to give a currency donation, that it would be wonderful too. Like any amount is helpful, like even $2, $3, $5. Venmo is at Matthew with two T's hyphen Lawton, Lauten. Cash App is $ Matthew Lawton, all one word, two T's, Lauten. And also, remember, I'm a professional astrologer. I have been doing astrology over 30 years. I've been doing it professionally over 20 years. I did 7 years of schooling. I was trained to do that. If you check out my website, there's a menu there with all kinds of different readings that I do, not only for individuals, but group events too. I'm looking for students too. I'm looking for a couple more students to start a live beginners class. www.astrologicalwinds.com. There's a contact there for me. I can work with payments on them, on the readings. And remember, that chart is so valuable. You never leave your chart. Invest in yourself. Don't rely on some computer to spit out 50 pages for you, or for some looking into some book or some friend who might have some interest. Get a professional reading if you see how this energy works, because you can really get your life energy in your own control and balance and discipline, and really make strides in your life once you're working with your energy correctly. So really, get that done. And, please pass the blog along. Remember, it's also available on podcasts, also on Instagram, and check the website out. And I will see you guys all next week. Thanks for tuning in as always. And we'll look at that new moon in Gemini next week.